I need someone who makes me feel proud the moment I introduce him to important people, my girlfriend said during a rooftop party while ignoring me for her wealthy coworker all night. I quietly left without causing a scene. Months later, she arrived at an executive event and realized I was the guest everyone was waiting for. "You're a good man." She said it the way people say sorry for your loss. Gentle, practiced, already moving past it. "But you're not the kind of man women feel proud introducing to important people." I stood there holding a glass of scotch I hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The rooftop was full of voices. Music, the kind of ambient jazz that Manhattan venues use to make people feel more important than they are. The city stretched behind her, towers lit up, bridges glowing, all of it indifferent. Veronica wasn't looking at me when she said it. She was already scanning the crowd. I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say. Because the man standing 10 feet behind her, Preston, her coworker, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car, was already walking toward us with that particular smile. The kind that says, "I know exactly what I'm interrupting." "Ronnie." He touched her shoulder like he owned it. "Hargrove is here. The one from the Meridian group. You should meet him before he gets surrounded." She turned instantly. Completely. Like I had already left. Like I was furniture that had briefly spoken. Yes, absolutely. She smoothed her dress, straightened her posture, became a different version of herself in 3 seconds. Preston glanced at me once. Brief. Dismissive. The way you glance at a coat rack. Then they walked away together. I should have left right then. But I stayed another 40 minutes. And that was my mistake. The party had started at 7. By 8:15, Veronica had forgotten I existed. Not dramatically. Not cruelly. Just systematically. The way someone forgets a name they never cared about learning in the first place. Preston worked in her firm's business development division. He had the kind of energy that filled a room sideways. Loud without raising his voice. Impressive without saying anything interesting. He wore a Patek Philippe that he found ways to check even when he already knew the time. He name-dropped like other men breathed. Effortlessly. Constantly. Casually mentioning when I had dinner with the Sandoval group or my last trip to the Maldives with a few clients. And Veronica responded to it the way a plant responds to light. She leaned toward him. Every time. I watched it from across the rooftop. I wasn't angry yet. That's the thing about a slow humiliation. It doesn't feel like humiliation at first. It feels like confusion. I found a corner near the railing and stood there watching the city because there was something cleaner about the city than the conversation happening 20 feet away. A mutual friend, Marcus, appeared beside me with a beer. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah." He looked toward Veronica and Preston. He looked back at me. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. "She's networking," I said, mostly to myself. Marcus took a slow sip. "Sure," he said. Around 9, Veronica found her way back to me. Not to reconnect. To retrieve. "Can you get me another drink?" The Aperol Spritz, the one I had before. That was it. No eye contact held. She was already half turned back toward Preston's orbit. I went and got the drink. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me still believed there was something to preserve. Some version of the evening that could still be rescued if I was patient enough. I brought her the drink. She took it without looking at me and said thanks in the same tone you'd use with a bartender. Preston glanced over and said something in her ear. She laughed. Not her usual laugh. Louder. Performative. The laugh that says, "I want certain people to hear this." A woman in a red blazer standing nearby looked at me for 1 second. Then she looked away quickly, like she felt something uncomfortable and preferred not to witness it. I understood that feeling. I was the one standing in it. The line came later. We were near the edge of the rooftop, finally alone for the first time in an hour. Preston was inside getting drinks or making calls or being important somewhere temporarily out of reach. I said something quiet. Something about leaving soon. Something about having an early call. Veronica turned to me with the expression of someone who has been waiting to say something. "I've been thinking," she started. That phrase. That specific phrase. Already I could feel the shape of what was coming. "I need someone who makes me feel proud the moment I introduce him to important people." She said it carefully, like she'd rehearsed it. "I love that you're stable and you're smart." I do. But when I'm in rooms like this, when I'm trying to build something, I need someone who commands attention just by walking in. Someone people already know. Someone who adds to my social presence, not. She paused. Not someone I have to explain. I looked at her for a long moment. She was wearing a dress I'd helped her pick out. We'd spent a Sunday afternoon in 3 different boutiques. She'd laughed the whole time. She'd said I had better taste than anyone she'd ever dated. Okay, I said. That was all. She blinked. I think she expected more. Pushback. Hurt. Some version of please don't do this. I set my glass down on the ledge. I'm going to head out, I said. Early call in the morning. We should finish talking about. There's nothing else to talk about, Veronica. I said it without coldness. Without drama. Just a fact delivered in the same tone you'd use to confirm a restaurant reservation. Then I walked toward the elevator. I didn't look back. I found my jacket at the coat check. Tipped the attendant. Walked out onto the street where the air was cooler and quieter and considerably more honest. She didn't notice I was gone until after midnight. I know because that's when the first text came. I didn't open it until morning. In the days that followed, something settled in me. Not peace exactly, more like clarity. The kind that arrives after you stop hoping something will become something it never was. I didn't call her. I didn't text her. I didn't do the things men do in these situations. No late night messages, no mutual friend channels, no carefully engineered run-ins. Nothing. I just went quiet. And silence, I've found, does more damage to a certain type of person than any argument ever could. The first week, she texted 3 times. Casual texts. Testing the temperature texts. The kind designed to feel like they're not reaching out even though they are. Hey, did you get home okay that night? I think we need to actually talk. You're being weird about this. I read them all. I responded to none. The second week, the text got longer. More explanation. More context. The rooftop was stressful. Preston was just a colleague. She hadn't meant it the way it came out. She just wanted someone who was ambitious, someone who showed up fully. She wasn't being shallow. I needed to understand what she actually meant. I understood exactly what she meant. That was the problem. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. By the 3rd week, the text stopped, which meant she decided I was the one who had something to apologize for. Fine. Let her have that story. I wasn't going to argue with it. I had other things to focus on. I want to explain something about myself. About the kind of man I am, or at least the kind of man I'd chosen to be for the last several years. I grew up in a household where money was something you discussed in private and protected in silence. My father built a distribution company over 30 years. He never wore the company logo. He never posted photos of the office. He drove a 10-year-old Volvo because, he said, the right people already know who you are. The wrong ones never need to. I carried that with me. By my early 30s, I was doing work that most people in my immediate social world had no framework for understanding. I sat on advisory boards for mid-sized technology companies going through acquisitions. I consulted on deal structures. I helped connect the right people to the right rooms at the right time, which sounds simple until you understand how many rooms exist that most people don't even know are happening. I had introduced 2 companies to investors that resulted in exits worth hundreds of millions of dollars. My name appeared in no press releases. I had equity in companies I never mentioned at dinner parties. The people who mattered in that world, a small, specific, deeply connected world, knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. Everyone else saw a quiet guy in a plain blazer with a forgettable watch. Veronica saw the plain blazer. She never thought to look at what the blazer was being invited into. That's not entirely her fault. I was, in some ways, deliberately invisible. But it was never a disguise. It was a preference. I don't enjoy the performance of success. I enjoy the reality of it. She wanted the performance. And so we had always been, in that fundamental way, entirely incompatible. I just took too long to accept it. The months that followed were some of the most productive of my life. Partly because I was no longer managing the emotional weight of a relationship that had been slowly asking me to apologize for who I was. Partly because I'd been building towards something for a long time, and it was almost ready. There was a company, a logistics tech startup called Arcfield, that I'd been quietly involved with for 18 months. Not as an employee, as a strategic partner. I'd helped them reframe their entire growth narrative, introduced them to 2 key investors, and restructured the way they presented their operational efficiency metrics to acquisition-hungry firms. They were getting acquired. The deal was worth enough that I spent a Tuesday afternoon having a longer than usual conversation with my accountant. On paper, very private paper, I had crossed a threshold I had once considered a distant goal. None of this appeared online. I didn't post about it. I didn't celebrate with people who hadn't been part of it. I had dinner with my brother, who lives in Brooklyn, and we ordered Italian food and talked about baseball for an hour, and that was my celebration. That was enough. But the Arkfield deal had something attached to it. A launch event. Arkfield's new parent company, a major logistics infrastructure group called Devereux Partners, was hosting an executive gala at the Meridian House. Top-floor private event space. Invitation only. The kind of evening where the handshakes mean more than most people's annual salaries. I'd been asked to attend as a recognized contributor to Arkfield's success story. More than that, I was one of the people the evening was, in part, meant to honor. I agreed to come. I made no announcement about it. I told 3 people, my assistant, my accountant, and my brother. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Veronica was learning something difficult. I didn't know this directly, but I heard it the way you hear things in a city like New York, through the small, connected tributaries of mutual social circles, through a comment here and there that arrives without being sought. Preston, it turned out, was a specific kind of man. He was generous with attention when there was something to gain and absolutely unreachable when there wasn't. He had spent months cultivating Veronica's interest, calling her impressive, taking her to the right places, mentioning her name in the right rooms. And then, when the networking utility had been extracted, he became someone else entirely. Distant, dismissive, suddenly very busy. She'd mistaken tactical flattery for genuine interest. She wasn't the first. She found out later, through office channels, through the particular social machinery of professional environments, that Preston had done the same thing to at least 2 other women in adjacent professional circles. He moved through people the way he moved through rooms, with visible confidence and zero residue. I heard she was struggling professionally, too. Her bid for a senior role at the firm had stalled. The sponsors she'd been counting on had their own agendas. The networking she'd invested in so heavily had produced a lot of interesting evenings and not very much structural career movement. I felt no satisfaction in this. What I felt was something quieter, something more like recognition. She had been doing exactly what she accused me of failing to do. She had been trying to become impressive through association. She had been trying to construct status from proximity to visible power. And it hadn't worked. Because that's not how it works. Not for the long term. Not for the things that actually matter. Then one evening I got a text from Marcus. She asked about you, it said. Ran into her at that bar on West 54th. She asked how you were doing. What did you say? I replied. Said you seemed good. Busy. Different somehow. Different how? Didn't have the words for it. Just said you seemed more settled. She got this look on her face. What kind of look? A pause. Then, the kind that comes too late. I arrived at the Meridian House at 7:45, 15 minutes before I was expected. I always arrive slightly early to large events. Not to be seen arriving, but because the room before a room fills up tells you more about the event than the room after it fills. The event space was on the 43rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Midtown. The kind of view that makes you understand why people spend their lives trying to get into rooms like this. Private caterers. Staff in dark suits moving with the particular discretion of professionals who understand that their job is to be invisible while everything around them is visible. About 60 people were already present. Another 60 were expected. The Devereux Partners team greeted me at the entrance. The event director, a woman named Claire who had organized 3 of these evenings and was very good at it, walked toward me immediately. You made it, she said, with the particular warmth of someone genuinely relieved. We weren't sure until this morning. I said I'd be here. I said, I know. You know how these things go. She smiled. Half the people we're waiting for don't actually appear until they appear. She introduced me to 2 of the Devereux senior partners. One of them, a man named Hargrove, gray-haired, direct, the kind of man who shakes your hand and holds it one beat longer than necessary to communicate that he's actually paying attention, said something I found unexpectedly moving. I've been looking forward to this for weeks, he said. What you did with the Arkfield narrative was something we've genuinely never seen. We should talk later. There are 2 other situations I'd like your thoughts on. I thanked him. Stayed close to the windows. Had one drink. Talked to 2 people I'd been wanting to see for months. The evening had that particular energy of a room where most of the people in it are genuinely accomplished and none of them feel the need to prove it loudly. Quiet power. The real kind. I hadn't been standing there 20 minutes when I noticed something shift in the room. Not dramatically, just a subtle recalibration of attention near the entrance, and I turned to see who had arrived. Preston was there. He was with 3 people from what looked like a mid-level finance firm, people I vaguely recognized from the city's second-tier networking circuit. He was wearing a different watch tonight. Newer. Larger. He was scanning the room the way he always scanned rooms, cataloging faces, calculating angles. And beside him, in a navy dress, looking more tired than I remembered, Veronica. I watched the moment she registered where she was. The entrance, the room, the quality of the people in it, the particular weight of the space. I watched Preston do his thing, working the edge of the room, nodding at people he recognized, inserting himself into conversations with the practiced ease of someone who has done this many times without understanding why it rarely leads anywhere. I turned back toward the window. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't performing. I heard her before I saw her next. A small sound. Not a word. Just something involuntary. The particular exhale of someone whose understanding of a situation has just restructured itself. Then she was beside me. Not by design. We'd simply ended up at the same section of the room through the ordinary geometry of a party, and she had looked up, and there I was. "Hey," she said. I turned. I hadn't seen her in 4 months. She looked composed, polished, but underneath the composure there was something unsteady, like a building that looks fine from the outside but has foundation problems. "Hey," I said. She looked around the room, back at me, around the room again. "You're here," she said, quietly, like she was confirming something. "I am. I didn't know you. How do you know these people?" I thought about how to answer that. "I've worked with some of them," I said. Simple, true, incomplete. She opened her mouth to say something else. Before she could, Hargrove appeared at my elbow. "There you are." He put a hand briefly on my arm. Not a grip, just a touch, the kind of casual physical contact that exists between people who have established trust. "Can I steal him for a few minutes? There are 3 people in the back room who've been asking for him all evening." He glanced at Veronica briefly, politely. "Of course," she said, because there was nothing else to say. I excused myself. I followed Hargrove toward the back of the floor, toward a smaller, private room where a group of 8 people were seated. People whose names I recognized from deal structures and boardrooms and conversations that never appear in social media feeds. Behind me, I heard nothing. Not because nothing was happening, but because some realizations arrive without sound. The private conversation lasted about 40 minutes. Specific, productive, the kind of conversation that results in calendar invitations and signed NDAs and, eventually, things that genuinely matter. When I came back into the main room, the event was in its later phase. The formal program had concluded. People were clustered in small groups. The energy was looser. I found Claire and thanked her for the evening. She walked me through a few more introductions. At some point, I looked across the room and saw Veronica standing with Preston's group near the far windows. She was physically present, but socially somewhere else. She was looking at me. Not the way she'd looked at me on the rooftop. Differently. The way you look at something you held carelessly and then watched fall. Preston was talking. He hadn't noticed she'd stopped listening. That was the thing about Preston. He rarely noticed when the room had moved on without him. She found me near the exit. I was collecting my jacket from the coat check. "Can I just say something?" she asked. Her voice was careful. No performance in it now. "Sure," I said. She looked at the floor, then at me. "I've been thinking about that night," she said. "The rooftop." What I said. I waited. "I was wrong about you," she said. "Not about you as a person. About what you were. What you are." I didn't understand what I was looking at. I held my jacket. She was waiting for something. Some absolution. Some opening. "You weren't invisible," she said. "I just didn't know what the rooms you were in looked like." Something she'd heard somewhere, from Marcus, maybe, or from someone else in the city's connective tissue, had landed and rearranged her understanding. I looked at her for a moment. She was telling me, in her way, that she'd made a mistake. And she had. I believed her. "I know," I said. "I think about it a lot," she said. I wanted you to know." I nodded. The coat check attendant handed me my receipt. I put my jacket on. "You spent so much time trying to find the room that would make you feel important," I said. "You didn't realize you were already standing next to someone who knew where all the rooms were." She didn't say anything. "Take care of yourself, Veronica," I said. And I meant it. Not bitterly. Not triumphantly. Just genuinely. Because somewhere under all the image management and social anxiety and performance, somewhere under the version of herself that had looked at me on a rooftop and found me insufficient. There was a person I had once cared about. But that person had made a very specific choice on a very specific evening. And the choices we make in unguarded moments tell us everything we need to know about what we actually value. I walked toward the elevator. I didn't look back this time either. There's a version of this story where I linger on the moment, where I describe the look on her face in the kind of detail that makes it feel like a victory lap. But I'm not interested in that. Because the honest truth is that the elevator doors closed behind me and I felt almost nothing. Not satisfaction, not sadness, not even the complicated warmth of having been finally understood. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that lives on the other side of something that's truly finished. The car I'd booked was waiting. The city moved past the windows. I thought about the conversation with Hargrove, the projects ahead, the work that was coming. I thought briefly about my father's 10-year-old Volvo and the particular wisdom embedded in that choice. The right people already know who you are. He was right. They always had. I heard, later, through the ordinary channels of a city that never fully stops talking, that Veronica and Preston had stopped whatever it was they'd been. No dramatic ending. Just the quiet dissolution of something that was always more strategy than feeling. She was still at the same firm. Still ambitious. Still building. I hope she builds something real. I genuinely do. I hope she finds a way to want what's actually in front of her instead of what she believes the right people are supposed to want. That's harder than it sounds. Most people never figure it out. There's a moment that keeps returning to me. Not the rooftop. Not the party. Not even Veronica's face in the Meridian house, rearranged by recognition. It's a smaller moment. 2 weeks after the gala, I was at a coffee shop near my office. The kind of place with no design ambition, terrible lighting, and genuinely good espresso. I go there most mornings. A guy I'd worked with on the Arkfield deal was at the counter ahead of me. We talked for 10 minutes. About the deal. About what was next. About a potential project in the spring. When he left, the woman behind the counter, early 20s, quick, observant, looked at me with the kind of curiosity that doesn't usually attach itself to men in plain blazers. "You two work together?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said. "He seems important." I smiled. "He is," I said. She handed me my coffee. "You seem important too," she said. "You just don't make a big deal of it." I took my coffee. "That's the whole point," I said. She finally looked at me the way she should have looked at me on that rooftop. She just wasn't the woman standing beside me anymore. And the man she was looking at, the one the executives crossed rooms to greet, the one the investors had been waiting for all evening, the one who had quietly helped build something real while she was focused on finding people who looked like they'd built something real, that man had stopped needing her to see it. That's the part she'll never fully understand. It was never about the recognition. It was never about being seen in the right room by the right people. The work had always been the point. The rooms were just where the work happened to take place. And the right people, the ones who had always mattered, had never needed me to explain myself to them. They already knew. They'd always known.